In the quiet town of Cedar Grove, where most folks are fast asleep by 9, something extraordinary was about to unfold at the local animal shelter. Shadow, a German Shepherd mix with soulful eyes and a peculiar habit of watching the security. Cameras had always seemed different from the other dogs. The staff noticed how he would stare intently at the woods beyond the fence, as if he knew something they didn't. On this moonless night, as the shelter's cameras recorded in silence, Shadow did more than just escape. He embarked on a mission that would expose the darkest secret their peaceful town had ever harbored. What compelled this ordinary shelter? A dog to venture into those woods, and how did he know exactly where to lead the authorities? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Chen had seen her fair share of unusual arrivals in her 15 years at Cedar Grove Animal Shelter, but something about Shadow's intake 6 months ago still nagged at her conscience. The German Shepherd mix had appeared on their doorstep. During one of those late autumn storms that paint the world in shades of grey, his dark coat slick with rain but otherwise remarkably well-groomed for a stray. Mike Thompson, the shelter's night security guard, had discovered Shadow sitting patiently by the front door during his evening rounds. "It was the strangest thing, Sarah," he'd said, running a weathered hand through his silver hair. He wasn't trying to get in or making any noise, just sitting there, watching the security camera above the door like he was waiting for someone to review the footage. The intake form Sarah filled out that night remained conspicuously incomplete. No collar, no microchip, no signs of neglect or abuse, just those intelligent eyes that seemed to hold secrets. Despite their best efforts, no one came forward to claim him, and the local veterinarian estimated his age at around 4 years. What truly set Shadow apart wasn't his appearance, though his black and silver coat was striking, but rather his peculiar behavior around the shelter's security system. While other dogs barely noticed the cameras mounted in the corners of their kennels, Shadow would spend hours studying them, his head tilted slightly as if decoding their purpose. "He's different from any dog I've worked with," Sarah confided to Mike one evening, watching Shadow through the observation window. The dog sat in his usual spot, eyes fixed on the monitor display in the staff room visible from his kennel. "It's almost like he understands what they're for." Mike nodded, his security badge catching the fluorescent light. "You know what's even stranger? He only does it with the cameras that face the woods. The ones pointing toward town, doesn't give them a second glance." The woods behind Cedar Grove Shelter had always been a source of local speculation. Decades ago, they'd been part of the old Morrison property, but after the family's sudden departure in the 90s, the land had grown wild and untamed. Hiking trails that once wound through the forest had disappeared beneath thick undergrowth, and the few remaining structures had been reclaimed by nature. Sarah found herself spending more time with Shadow than any other animal in their care. She'd bring paperwork into his kennel, and he'd watch her with an intensity that made her feel like she was being evaluated rather than the other way around. Sometimes she'd catch him staring at her security badge, his eyes tracking the movement of the laminated card as it swayed from her lanyard. "What are you trying to tell us?" she'd whisper when they were alone, but Shadow would only press his nose against the kennel bars, his gaze drawn inexorably back to those cameras and the mysterious woods beyond. As the months passed, Shadow's presence became a comfortable constant in the shelter's daily routine. He was unfailingly gentle with the staff, patient during medical examinations, and somehow seemed to calm the other dogs during thunderstorms. But he showed no interest in the potential adopters who visited, politely refusing their attention in favor of his vigilant observation post. The intake form in Sarah's desk drawer remained a reminder of Shadow's mysterious origins. She'd added notes over the months, shows unusual interest in security systems, demonstrates advanced problem-solving abilities, appears to recognize uniformed personnel. Each entry painted a picture of a dog that seemed less like a stray, and more like a trained professional who had arrived with a purpose. What that purpose might be, Sarah couldn't begin to guess. But on that moonless night when everything changed, she would finally understand why Shadow had chosen their shelter and why he had spent 6 months studying every detail of their security system with such deliberate attention. Cedar Grove Animal Shelter operated like a well-worn timepiece, its daily rhythms marked by the meticulous entries in the shelter's logbook. Every morning began with the same routine: feeding at 6, medical checks at 7, and the first staff meeting of the day at 8 sharp. But lately, the logbook had begun to tell a different story, one that centered around Shadow's increasingly unusual behavior. 600. Shadow, already alert and watching cameras before morning rounds, refused breakfast until security feed was switched on. Sarah's neat handwriting filled the margins with observations that seemed more suited to a detective's notebook than an animal shelter's daily log. Dr. Emily Martinez, the shelter's veterinarian, had started her own section in the logbook dedicated to Shadow's peculiarities. Her 30 years of experience with animals had taught her to trust her instincts, and something about this dog made her professional curiosity spark. The way he processes information isn't typical canine behavior, she explained to Sarah one morning reviewing her notes. When most dogs learn something new, there's a pattern of trial and error. Shadow doesn't do that. He watches, analyzes, and then executes perfectly the first time. The security office had become Shadow's favorite spot during his daily enrichment. Time. Mike had started keeping a separate chair for him, a gesture that raised eyebrows among the shelter's board members, but one that Sarah steadfastly defended. From this vantage point, Shadow would study the bank of monitors with an attention span that defied normal canine behavior. "Look at this," Mike said one afternoon, rewinding the morning's footage. On screen, Shadow's morning walk took him past the shelter's fence line. Every few feet he would pause, head tilted, as if measuring distances. He does this every day, same spots, same angle, been going on for weeks now. The shelter's youngest staff member, Tommy Rodriguez, had started plotting Shadow's fence line stops on a map. "It's like he's checking for weaknesses," the 20-year-old volunteer coordinator observed, showing Sarah his notebook. "But here's the weird part. He only does it along the sections facing the woods." The woods themselves had begun to feature more prominently in shelter discussions. Carol Weber, who'd served as the shelter's administrative assistant for over 2 decades, remembered stories about the old Morrison property. "There used to be several buildings back there," she told Sarah over coffee. "Storage sheds, a garage, maybe even an old barn. All abandoned now, but the foundation should still be there under all that growth." Sarah found herself spending her lunch breaks in the security office, sharing her sandwich with Shadow while reviewing old property maps of the area. The dog would watch the screens with such intensity that she began narrating what they were, seeing, feeling less foolish about it with each passing day. "That section there," she'd say, pointing to the northeast corner of the property, "that's where the old access road used to be." Shadow's ears would prick forward, his eyes never leaving the monitor. Sometimes he'd whine softly when certain areas came into view, a sound that made the hair on the back of Sarah's neck stand up. The logbook continued to fill with entries that seemed increasingly significant in retrospect. Tommy noted how Shadow would grow agitated during certain weather conditions, not from the weather itself, but rather when the security camera's visibility was affected by fog or heavy rain. Dr. Martinez documented his unusual interest in the shelter's night vision equipment during routine maintenance checks. Even the other animals seemed to sense something different about Shadow. The usually vocal kennel block would fall silent when he passed through during his supervised walks. Newly arrived strays, typically anxious and defensive, would calm in his presence. It was as if they recognized something in him that the humans were still struggling to understand. "I've got a theory," Mike said one evening as he and Sarah watched Shadow make his meticulous fence line inspection. "Remember those stories about search and rescue dogs, the ones trained to work independently in disaster zones?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Shadow moves like that, like he's been trained for something specific." Sarah thought about the incomplete intake form in her desk, about the mysterious circumstances of Shadow's arrival, about his focused interest in their security systems. But trained by whom, she wondered aloud. And more importantly, trained for what? The answer to those questions would come sooner than any of them expected, written in the footage of their security cameras on a moonless night, when Shadow finally put his carefully laid plans into action. All those months of observation, all those careful inspections, they hadn't been random at all. They had been preparation. But as Sarah reviewed the day's final logbook entry that evening, 2200, all secure, Shadow alert but calm in kennel, she had no way of knowing that by morning everything they thought they knew about their mysterious resident would change forever. The call came at 3:17 a.m., jolting Sarah from a fitful sleep. Mike's voice on the other end was tight with concern. "You need to come in. Shadow's gone." The drive to the shelter took 11 minutes. Sarah knew because she watched each digit change. On her dashboard clock, her mind racing faster than her car through the empty streets. Gone. The word echoed in her thoughts, carrying more weight than it should for someone who had handled dozens of escape cases over the years. The shelter's parking lot was empty except for Mike's truck and the patrol car belonging to Officer Pete Martinez, Dr. Martinez's husband and Cedar Grove's most experienced canine handler. As Sarah pulled in, her headlights illuminated something that made her stomach drop, a section of chain-link fence near the woods, pulled away with surgical precision. "Found this caught in the fence," Mike said as she approached, holding up a torn piece of wire that would become their first piece of evidence. Under the harsh beam of his flashlight, the cut was clean, deliberate, not the ragged edge you'd expect from an animal's desperate escape attempt. Officer Martinez stood nearby, his weathered face grave. "This wasn't a breakout," he said, running, his fingers along the fence line. "Look at the pattern. These cuts were made over time, weakening the structure gradually. Your dog didn't just escape tonight. He's been planning this." Sarah thought about all those careful inspections Shadow had made along the fence, what they had mistaken for simple curiosity. "Show me the footage," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The security office felt different in the middle of the night, the bank of monitors casting a ghostly glow over their faces as Mike queued up the evening's recordings. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. when Shadow appeared on screen, moving with purpose through his kennel area. "Watch this," Mike said, softly pointing to the monitor. They watched as Shadow approached his water bowl, precisely tipping it over. Water spread across the concrete floor, seeping under the kennel door. Then Shadow did something that made Sarah's breath catch. He waited, watching the door mechanism with calculated patience. "The electronic locks," Sarah whispered, understanding, dawning. "They short-circuit when they get wet. That's why he always watched during the maintenance checks." All those months of observation hadn't just been about the cameras. Shadow had been studying every detail of the shelter's security systems. The footage continued, showing Shadow slipping through his kennel door with fluid grace, navigating the darkened corridors as if he'd rehearsed it countless times. Which Sarah realized he had. During every daily walk, every enrichment session, every moment they'd thought he was simply being curious. "Here's where it gets strange," Mike said, switching to an exterior camera view. Shadow appeared at the fence line, moving to the exact spot he'd been checking for months. The camera's night vision showed him working methodically at the weakened section, using his weight and leverage in a way that spoke of training rather than instinct. "Officer." Martinez leaned forward, his police instincts engaged. That's not normal animal behavior. Those are practiced movements, military or police dog training patterns. Your shadows had professional training, high-level stuff. But it was the next sequence that changed everything. Once through the fence, Shadow didn't bolt for freedom like any other escaped dog would. Instead, he turned to face the camera directly, his eyes reflecting the infrared light with an almost human intelligence. Then, with deliberate clarity, he barked 3 times. "A signal, he wants us to follow him," Sarah said, certainty filling her voice. All this time, he wasn't looking for a way out. He was looking for a way to show us something in those woods. The final footage showed Shadow disappearing into the tree line, but not before looking back one last time at the camera. The message was clear. "Come find me. Come see what I've discovered." Officer Martinez was already on his radio, calling for backup. "Whatever your dog's found out there, he thinks it's important enough to risk everything to show us. In 20 years of K9 work, I've never seen anything like this." Sarah stared at the torn piece of fence wire in her hand, running her fingers along its deliberately weakened edge. This small piece of metal represented months of patient planning by a dog who had chosen their shelter for a reason. A dog who had spent half a year learning their security systems not to defeat them, but to use them as tools for something bigger. "We need to go after him," she said, already reaching for her coat. "Whatever Shadow's trying to show us, he's been preparing for this moment since the day he arrived." As if in response, a distant barking echoed from the woods. 3 sharp barks. Just like in the footage, Shadow was out there, waiting, ready to reveal why he had chosen Cedar Grove Animal Shelter as the base for his crucial mission. Dawn was still an hour away when the search party assembled at the shelter's back gate. Officer Martinez had marked up a forest trail map with a UV pen, creating a grid pattern that would soon become their guide through the darkness. The map, spread across the hood of his patrol car, showed the old Morrison property boundaries and the remnants of long-abandoned access roads. "We'll work in teams," Martinez explained, his flashlight beam highlighting different sections of the map. "Mike, you're with me. Sarah, you'll partner with Officer Rodriguez, Tommy's uncle, since we need someone who knows these woods." He nodded toward a stocky officer who shared Tommy's sharp features. "Doc, you're on standby here with the medical kit, just in case." Dr. Martinez squeezed her husband's arm. "Be careful out there, Pete. Something about this feels bigger than a missing dog." Sarah studied the map, noting how Shadow's escape route aligned perfectly with one of the old service roads. "He knew exactly where he was going," she murmured, tracing the path with her finger. "All those months watching the cameras, he was mapping his route." The woods seemed to swallow their flashlight beams as they moved past the tree line. The ground was soft from recent rain, and Officer Martinez quickly found what he was looking for, distinctive paw prints leading deeper into the forest. "Look at the pattern," he said, crouching down. "He's not running or wandering. These are tactical movements using cover, staying in shadows." Mike's security training kicked in as he noticed something else. The spacing is deliberate. He's stopping, every 50 feet or so, waiting, like he's making sure he can be followed. They moved deeper into the woods, the shelter's lights fading behind them. The old service road was barely visible, reclaimed by 20 years of vegetation. But Shadow's trail followed it unerringly. Every so often, they'd hear 3 distinct barks in the distance, the same signal from the security footage. "He's leading us somewhere specific," Officer Rodriguez said, his voice low, "and he's making sure we're keeping up." An hour into the search, the terrain began to change. The undergrowth thinned out, showing signs of recent clearance. Sarah's flashlight beam caught something that made her stop short, a fresh tire track cutting through the mud. "Pete," she called softly, "you need to see this." Officer Martinez examined the track, his expression hardening. "Heavy vehicle, probably a panel van. Recent, within the last day or 2. He played his light around the clearing, revealing more signs of activity. "Someone's been using this old road regularly." Mike moved ahead, then suddenly raised his hand in warning. Hold up! You all need to see this. In the beam of their combined flashlights, a disturbing scene emerged. Hidden behind a screen of dense bushes was a small clearing that had been used as a dumping ground. Empty bags of commercial dog food lay scattered about, along with torn bedding, broken water bowls, and items that made Sarah's blood run cold, used veterinary supplies and medication bottles with their labels scratched off. This isn't random. Dumping, Officer Rodriguez said, photographing the scene with his phone. This is systematic. Regular supply disposal from some kind of operation. Sarah picked up one of the medicine bottles, her hands shaking slightly. These are prescription sedatives, the kind used for long-distance animal transport. But the shelter's the only licensed facility in Cedar Grove that can prescribe these. Not the only facility, Martinez corrected grimly, just the only legal one. A series of sharp barks cut through the pre-dawn air. Closer now, more urgent. Shadow was calling them forward, deeper into the woods, where the old Morrison property held its darkest secrets. Mike swept his flashlight in a wide arc, revealing more disturbing signs of activity. Wheel ruts, fresh gravel where the old road was washing out, broken branches cleared away. Someone's been maintaining this access route. Recently. But maintaining it for what? Sarah wondered aloud, though part of her already knew the answer. Shadow hadn't just discovered evidence of criminal activity. He'd found something big enough to spend months planning this night, something that required careful preparation and precise timing. Officer Martinez was on his radio, voice low and urgent. Dispatch, we're going to need additional units, and tell Detective Ramirez to roll on this. We've got evidence of organized criminal activity on the old Morrison property. He paused, listening to the response. No, keep them silent on approach. Something tells me we don't want to announce ourselves just yet. Another set of barks echoed through the trees, Shadow's signal pulling them forward. But this time there was something else in his voice, a note of urgency that hadn't been there before. He knows we're close, Sarah said, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness ahead. Whatever he's found out here, we're almost there. The group moved forward more cautiously now, following Shadow's trail deeper into the woods where the old Morrison property held secrets that would shake their quiet town to its core. With each step, the evidence mounted. They weren't just following a dog anymore. They were following a trained investigator who had spent months building his case, and now he was finally ready to show them what he had discovered. The first hint of civilization appeared as a shadow against the lightening sky, the silhouette of what had once been the Morrison family's equipment barn. But it was the object at Sarah's feet that stopped her cold. A discarded breeding rack. Its metal frame twisted and rusted but unmistakable to anyone who'd worked in animal welfare. Modern hardware on old hinges, Mike observed, crouching to examine the rack. Someone's been maintaining this equipment recently. His security training made him notice details others might miss. Fresh tool marks on old metal, new welding spots on vintage framework. Shadow's barking had ceased, replaced by a low, deliberate growl coming from behind a dense thicket. Officer. Martinez held up his hand, signaling the group to hold position. Sarah, play your light over there. Slowly. The flashlight beam revealed a scene that confirmed their worst suspicions. Stacked against a partially collapsed wall were dozens of commercial-grade kennels, their metal surfaces showing signs of recent use. Feeding troughs lined one side, fitted with automated dispensers that seemed jarringly modern against the decrepit barn's facade. This is an active operation, Officer Rodriguez whispered, his camera clicking quietly as he documented the scene. Look at the ground, multiple tire tracks, all recent, different vehicles, regular traffic. Shadow appeared at the edge of their flashlight beams, his dark coat making him nearly invisible in the pre-dawn gloom. His behavior had changed. Gone was the urgent barking of their guide. Now he moved like the trained professional they were beginning to understand he truly was. Body low, ears forward, every movement precise and calculated. "He's showing us how to approach," Martinez observed, his years of canine experience reading. Shadow's body language. "Those aren't stress signals, they're tactical movements. Your shelter dog's had serious training, Sarah. This isn't his first operation." They followed Shadow's lead, moving carefully through the shadows of the old barn. The evidence they found told a story of sophisticated criminal enterprise, shipping manifests tucked into waterproof containers, carefully organized veterinary, supplies, and equipment that spoke of significant financial investment. "These are professional-grade monitoring systems," Mike said, examining a partially dismantled security camera. "Motion detection, night vision, cellular uplink to avoid hardwired connections that could be traced." He picked up a broken piece of surveillance equipment, adding it to their growing collection of evidence. "Whoever's running this place knows their security." Shadow had moved to a corner of the barn, pawing insistently at what appeared to be a solid wall. Officer Martinez played his flashlight over the area, revealing the edges of a carefully concealed access panel. "Well done, boy," he murmured, reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, we're going to need CSI out here. Multiple buildings, extensive evidence of organized criminal activity." But Shadow wasn't finished. He moved with increasing urgency now, leading them away from the barn toward what appeared to be an overgrown garden shed. The morning light was growing stronger, revealing details that had been hidden in darkness. Fresh padlocks on old doors, modern ventilation systems disguised as deteriorating infrastructure, and most tellingly, the faint but unmistakable sounds of dogs whimpering. "There are animals in there," Sarah whispered, her professional calm warring with rising anger. "Recently, fed too. Smell the kibble?" Officer Rodriguez was already documenting the padlocks. "These aren't just security measures," he noted, photographing the sophisticated locking mechanism. "They're designed to look old and abandoned from a distance. Everything here is carefully crafted to hide in plain sight." Shadow circled back. To them, his behavior shifting again. The purposeful police dog disappeared, replaced by what appeared to be a timid, uncertain stray, the same behavior they'd observed when he'd first arrived at the shelter. But now Sarah understood what she was seeing. It was an act, she realized, watching Shadow demonstrate the same fearful body language he'd shown 6 months ago. He wasn't just a scared stray when he came to us. He was undercover, choosing our shelter specifically because it gave him a vantage point to observe this operation. Martinez nodded grimly. Military or police dogs are sometimes trained to maintain deep cover for extended operations, but this level of independence, the strategic planning, this is something else entirely. A sudden noise from the shed made them all freeze. Shadow's posture changed instantly. His cover dropped as he positioned himself between the search party and potential threat. The sound came again, a metal door sliding somewhere inside the building. "Someone's here," Mike whispered, already moving to secure their position. "They're doing morning rounds." Martinez was on his radio again, voice barely audible. "All units move in now. Silent approach. We have active suspects on site." To the others he added, "Stay behind me, and Sarah, keep Shadow close. Something tells me we're going to need his expertise before this is over." Shadow's eyes were fixed on the shed door, his body tense but controlled. In the growing morning light, there was no trace of the shelter dog they'd known for 6 months. Instead, they saw what Shadow truly was, a highly trained operative who had spent half a year building up to this moment, waiting for exactly the right time to expose a criminal enterprise that had hidden in Cedar Grove's woods for far too long. Detective Lisa Martinez arrived as the sun crested the tree line, her unmarked car pulling up silently behind the growing line of police vehicles. Her first action was to pull out a thick case file, one that would become the foundation of Cedar Grove's most significant criminal investigation. "We've been tracking similar operations across 3 states, she explained, spreading crime scene photos across her car's hood. "Professional setups, always just outside small towns. always near legitimate animal facilities that could mask the increased traffic. She paused, looking at Shadow, who sat alertly beside Sarah. But we've never had inside intelligence like this before. The initial police report laid out the facts in stark official language, responding to civilian tip, shelter staff, and K9 unit indication. Multiple buildings containing evidence of illegal breeding operation, sophisticated security, measures suggesting organized criminal enterprise. Immediate connection to interstate case AP 2024-117 confirmed. Officer Pete Martinez, the detective's brother, was coordinating with the tactical team that had surrounded the property. 2 suspects in custody, he reported. Caught them during morning feeding rounds. They're local hires, probably don't know much about the bigger operation. Sarah watched as crime scene technicians moved methodically through the area, their cameras flashing in the morning light. Shadow stayed close to her side, but his attention never wavered from the shed they'd discovered earlier. His behavior had changed again. No longer the undercover shelter dog or the tactical guide, but something in between. He's waiting, Detective Martinez observed, following Shadow's gaze. He knows we haven't found everything yet. The detective's words proved prophetic when the forensics team began their preliminary search of the shed. Behind carefully maintained equipment and false walls, they discovered documentation that pointed to a much larger operation. Shipping schedules, veterinary supply orders, and most significantly, a coded ledger that matched patterns from similar cases across state lines. This is organized crime, Detective Martinez explained, carefully bagging the ledger as evidence. They set up near small towns with good highway access, operate for 18 to 24 months, then disappear before anyone connects the dots. She turned to Sarah. Except this time, they didn't count on having an undercover operative in their midst. Mike, who'd been helping document the security systems, called them over to see something on his phone. I've been reviewing our shelter's security footage from the past 6 months, he said, playing a clip. Look at Shadow's behavior during transport days, when different vehicles would come through our parking lot. The footage showed Shadow's apparently random interest in certain vehicles, all panel vans, all matching the tire tracks they'd found in the woods. He wasn't just watching our cameras, Sarah realized. He was using them to monitor their traffic patterns, maybe even identify vehicles connected to the operation. Detective Martinez made rapid notes in her case file. This is unprecedented. We've never had documentation of their movements this detailed before. She looked at Shadow with professional admiration. Your boy here hasn't just been gathering evidence, he's been building a comprehensive surveillance record. The discovery of a hidden cell phone, carefully concealed in the shed's rafters, broke the case wide open. The forensics team's preliminary analysis revealed connections to similar operations in neighboring states, all following the same pattern. Hidden locations, sophisticated security, and ties to legitimate businesses that could provide cover. The breeding operation is just the visible part, Detective Martinez explained, pointing to a complex organizational chart she'd begun assembling. Behind it, there's money laundering, prescription drug trafficking, interstate transport violations, classic, organized crime structure, just with animals instead of traditional contraband. Sarah felt a chill as she recognized names on the chart, respected businesses, local vendors, even a few veterinary supply companies she'd worked with. How deep does this go? That's what we're going to find out, the detective replied, adding another note to her growing case file. And thanks to your Shadow, we have something we've never had before. 6 months of detailed surveillance and documentary evidence. Shadow's ears suddenly pricked forward, his body language shifting back to high alert. Detective Martinez noticed immediately. What is it, boy? What haven't we found yet? The German Shepherd moved purposefully toward the shed's far corner, pawing at what appeared to be solid concrete. Officer Martinez played his flashlight over the area, revealing almost invisible seams in the floor. There's something underneath, he said, calling over the forensics team. Some kind of sublevel. as they prepared to investigate what lay beneath. The shed. Sarah watched Shadow's intense focus and finally understood the full scope of his mission. He hadn't just discovered a local criminal operation. He'd infiltrated a sophisticated criminal network, gathered evidence methodically for months, and was now revealing it layer by layer with the precision of a trained investigator. Detective. Martinez added another page to her case file, this one marked Confidential K9 Operative Report. She glanced at Shadow, then at Sarah. I think it's time we found out exactly who your shelter dog really is, and who sent him to Cedar Grove. Because this isn't just good police work. This is the kind of deep cover operation that only very specialized units would attempt. The criminal network chart spread across the mobile command center's wall grew more complex by the hour. Detective Martinez used different colored strings to connect photos, documents, and locations, creating a web that stretched far beyond Cedar Grove's quiet borders. At its center was a printed satellite image of the Morrison property, with Shadow's surveillance routes marked in bold red lines. 6 distinct shell companies, Detective Martinez explained, tapping various points on the chart. All registered in different states, all with seemingly legitimate business fronts. Pet supply companies, transport services, even a chain of small veterinary clinics. She shook her head in admiration. Shadow didn't just find one operation, he uncovered their entire regional distribution network. The 2 suspects caught during morning rounds had already started talking, their statements adding new layers to the investigation. They were indeed local hires, former maintenance workers recruited for their knowledge of the old Morrison property, but their testimonies pointed to a sophisticated organization. They'd get their instructions by burner phone. Officer Rodriguez reported, reviewing their statements. Different vehicle every delivery day, different routes to avoid patterns, professional setup, the kind you see in major drug operations. Sarah studied the network chart, recognizing more names than she wanted to. Peterson's Pet Supplies, she read aloud, pointing to one connection. They tried to become our shelter's primary vendor 6 months ago. She paused, a new realization hitting her. Right after Shadow arrived. He was already building the case. Mike said, pulling up more security footage on his laptop. Look at this. The screen showed Shadow's apparent anxiety during the vendor's visit. What they'd interpreted as fear now clearly revealed as focused observation. He was identifying their personnel, maybe even documenting delivery schedules. Detective Martinez added another document to the wall, a specialized K9 unit report from an unnamed federal agency. We've confirmed Shadow's training signature, she said. The way he processes scenes, his evidence-gathering patterns, his deep cover techniques, they all match an elite program that trains dogs for long-term undercover operations. Sarah remembered Shadow's careful study of the shelter's security systems, his methodical fence line inspections, his apparent anxiety during certain vehicle deliveries. Everything he did was purposeful, she realized. Even choosing our shelter, he needed a location that would give him visual coverage of their transport routes. The investigation had drawn federal attention. Agent Catherine Chen, from an unnamed agency, arrived mid-morning, heading straight for the network chart. Her first words were about Shadow. How long did he maintain his cover? 6 months, Sarah replied. We thought he was just a quiet, observant shelter dog. Agent Chen nodded approvingly. Perfect deep cover behavior. These dogs are trained to gather intelligence while maintaining completely normal patterns for their assumed roles. She studied Shadow, who sat alertly nearby. They learn to process complex operational requirements while appearing to be ordinary animals. It's the ultimate covert surveillance tool. The network chart gained another layer when the forensics team decoded the hidden cell phone's data. Messages revealed a pattern of operations spanning 5 states, with Cedar Grove serving as a crucial distribution hub. They chose this location carefully, Agent Chen explained, tracing transport routes on a map. Small town, minimal law enforcement presence, easy highway access, and most importantly, a legitimate animal shelter nearby to explain any unusual traffic patterns. What they hadn't counted on was Shadow's patient, methodical investigation. The evidence he'd gathered over 6 months was devastating. Vehicle descriptions, personnel identifications, delivery schedules, and most crucially, documentation of their entire regional network. "Look at how he did it," Detective Martinez said, reviewing shelter security footage. "He used our cameras to photograph their vehicles, our daily walks to map their property, even our routine maintenance checks to learn about security systems. Every detail of his shelter dog behavior was actually carefully planned intelligence gathering." Sarah thought about all the times she'd worked late, Shadow keeping her company in the security office. He was using our security system as his own surveillance network, she realized. All those hours watching the monitors, he was conducting professional surveillance operations right in front of us. The command center buzzed with activity as more evidence emerged. Financial investigators traced money laundering operations, disguised as pet supply purchases. Drug enforcement teams identified patterns of veterinary drug trafficking hidden within legitimate supply orders. With each discovery, Shadow's 6-month deep cover operation proved more crucial. "This isn't just about illegal breeding," Agent Chen said, adding another layer to the network chart. "This is organized crime using the pet industry as cover for multiple illegal operations." Shadow didn't just find evidence, he gave us the key to unraveling their entire regional network. But Shadow's attention remained fixed on the shed's hidden sub-level, now being carefully examined by structural engineers. His body language suggested they still hadn't found everything. There were more secrets buried beneath the Morrison property, secrets that would reveal just how deep this criminal network really went. Detective Martinez studied Shadow's alert posture. "Whatever's down there," she said, "it's what he's been waiting to show us. Everything else, the surveillance, the evidence, gathering, the network mapping, it was all building up to this moment." The structural engineer's blueprint of the hidden cellar revealed what the criminals had tried so hard to conceal: a sophisticated underground facility extending far beyond the shed's footprint. As the technical team carefully mapped the sub-level, Shadow's behavior became increasingly urgent, his training warring with barely contained emotion. "Look at this," the engineer said, pointing to anomalies in the ground-penetrating radar display. "Multiple chambers, reinforced walls, independent ventilation system. This isn't some makeshift storage space. This is a professional underground facility." Detective Martinez studied the blueprint intently. Climate-controlled areas, sound dampening, construction, emergency power systems. They spent serious money on this. She glanced at Shadow, who hadn't taken his eyes off the concrete floor since they'd discovered the seams. And he knew it was here all along. The technical team worked methodically to access the hidden entrance, following Shadow's cues about where to focus their efforts. When they finally located the primary access point, it was disguised as part of the building's original foundation, completely invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. "Stand back," Officer Martinez warned as they prepared to open the heavy hydraulic door. "We don't know what's down there, but given the investment they made in hiding it, it's got to be the heart of their operation." The door opened with a pressurized hiss, revealing a stairwell that descended into darkness. The air that rushed out carried a smell that made Sarah's blood run cold, the unmistakable odor of too many animals kept in too small a space. Shadow moved first, his training taking over as he led the tactical team down the stairs. The facilities, emergency lighting cast an eerie glow over concrete walls lined with sophisticated monitoring equipment. Security cameras covered every angle, feeding into a central control room that would have put most professional operations to shame. "This isn't just a local operation," Agent Chen said, examining the control center. "This is cartel-level infrastructure. They were running their entire regional network from down here. But it was what they found in the side chambers that revealed the true horror of the operation. Dozens of dogs, primarily breeding females, were housed in stacked cages that had been designed to be quickly emptied and moved. Each animal had been tagged and documented with cold efficiency, their value measured solely in their breeding potential. "These are the ones they couldn't move in time," Detective Martinez said grimly, reviewing the facility's electronic records. According to these logs, they usually house 3 times this number, rotating them between similar facilities across state lines. Sarah worked with the rescue team, her professional calm tested by each new discovery. The dogs were all purebreds, clearly valuable, but showed signs of long-term confinement and overbreeding. Among them, she found something that made her catch her breath, a German shepherd female whose markings perfectly matched Shadow's. Elena, Agent Chen read from the dog's documentation. One of their prime breeding dogs reported missing during transport 6 months ago. She looked at Shadow, understanding dawning in her eyes. "That's why you chose this operation, isn't it? This is personal for you." Shadow stood beside the cage containing Elena, his undercover persona completely gone. Now they saw him for what he truly was, a highly trained operative who had spent 6 months orchestrating this moment, driven by more than just his training. The rescue operation swung into full gear, with veterinary teams arriving from 3 counties to help process and treat the dogs. Dr. Martinez coordinated the medical response, her years of experience helping her prioritize the most critical cases. "They were running a sophisticated breeding program down here," she reported, reviewing medical records found on the facility's computers. Genetic testing, artificial insemination, carefully planned bloodlines, all focused on producing the highest value puppies possible. But the cellar held one more surprise. In the heavily secured back chamber, they found what Shadow had really been looking for, a computer server containing detailed records of the entire criminal enterprise. Financial transactions, transport routes, client lists, supplier networks, everything. Needed to dismantle not just this facility, but similar operations across multiple states. This is what he was after all along, Detective Martinez realized, watching federal cybercrime specialists secure the server. The dogs needed immediate rescue, yes, but this evidence, this will shut down their entire network. Agent Chen nodded, adding her own observations to an increasingly detailed report. 6 months of deep cover work, gathering intelligence, mapping their security, learning their patterns, all building up to this moment when he knew we'd find not just the victims, but the evidence to bring down the entire organization. Sarah watched as Eleanor was carefully moved to a transport vehicle, Shadow following protectively at her side. "He didn't just find criminal evidence," she said softly. "He found his partner. Everything else, maintaining his cover at the shelter, using our security systems, studying their operation, it was all to reach this moment." The cellar's blueprint would become a key piece of evidence in the federal investigation, its detailed layout revealing how the criminal enterprise had hidden in plain sight. But for those who had followed Shadow's trail through the darkness, it represented something more, the physical proof of one dog's remarkable journey from undercover operative to hero, driven by both duty and devotion to free those trapped in the shadows of human cruelty. The Cedar Grove Gazette's front page told the story in bold headlines: "Hero Shelter Dog Exposes Criminal Enterprise, Sophisticated Underground Operation Discovered in Morrison Woods." Below the headline, a still from the shelter's security footage showed Shadow in what they now knew had been his careful surveillance work, his eyes fixed on the cameras that had become his tools for justice. Editor-in-Chief Margaret Wilson, who'd been covering Cedar Grove news for 3 decades, knew she had the story of her career. "In all my years of journalism," she wrote in her front-page editorial, "I've never seen anything quite like this. a trained police dog working undercover for 6 months, using our local shelter's security systems to document criminal activity that spanned 5 states. Truth, as they say, is stranger than fiction. The national media descended on Cedar Grove like a storm. News vans lined the shelter's parking lot, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like mechanical trees. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, carefully navigating interviews while protecting the ongoing investigation. "We're receiving calls from major networks," Carol said, managing the shelter's suddenly overwhelming phone system. "They all want the inside story. How we didn't realize we had an undercover operative living among us for half a year." Detective Martinez had provided carefully worded statements for the press. "The investigation is ongoing, but we can confirm that this operation has led to the discovery of a sophisticated criminal network operating across multiple states. The evidence gathered through this long-term surveillance operation will be crucial in dismantling similar facilities throughout the region." But it was the human angle that captured public imagination. Local residents who had visited the shelter during Shadow's tenure came forward with their own observations, each story adding to the growing legend. Tommy's social media posts about Shadow's peculiar behaviors had gone viral, with millions now analyzing every recorded interaction for clues they'd missed. "He wasn't just gathering evidence," Mike explained to a captivated reporter, reviewing security footage that had become international news. "He was building a case, methodically and carefully, using our shelter's resources in ways we never imagined possible. Every time we thought he was just being a concerned shelter dog, he was actually conducting professional surveillance." The story took on new dimensions as federal authorities revealed more about similar operations being shut down across state lines, all thanks to evidence Shadow had helped uncover. The Cedar Grove operation hadn't been an isolated case. It had been a crucial hub in a network that had operated in plain sight for years. Sarah found herself looking at the newspaper's front-page photo, remembering all the quiet moments when she'd thought she was helping a timid shelter dog adjust. Now she understood she'd been working alongside a trained professional who had chosen their shelter specifically for its strategic value in his investigation. The media storm brought unexpected benefits. Shelters across the country reported increased adoption rates as Shadow's story inspired people to give rescue dogs a second look. The Cedar Grove Animal Shelter's previously tight budget was transformed by donations and grants, allowing them to upgrade the very security systems Shadow had used so effectively in his investigation. But amidst the headlines and interviews, Sarah noticed something telling. Shadow, now officially revealed as a highly trained police dog, maintained his protective watch over the shelter. Even with his cover blown and his mission accomplished, he seemed reluctant to leave his post. Perhaps, she thought, watching him, guide Elena through her recovery. Some roles become more than just an assignment. Sometimes they become a calling. The anonymous threat letter arrived on expensive paper, delivered among the shelter's morning mail. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into," it read in carefully printed letters. "Sometimes sleeping dogs should be left to lie." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she handed the letter to Detective Martinez, who immediately sealed it in. "An evidence bag. They're getting desperate," the detective said, examining the letter through the plastic. "This network's been operating unchallenged for years. Now suddenly they're exposed, their operations compromised, their clients under investigation. They're bound to push back." Shadow's behavior had shifted again, returning to the alert vigilance they'd first witnessed during his undercover work. But now there was no need to hide his training. He patrolled the shelter's perimeter with professional precision, responding to sounds and movements that others might miss. Agent Chen had increased federal presence around the shelter, understanding its symbolic importance to the case. "They're not just threatening a local animal shelter," she explained during an emergency staff briefing. You're now the visible face of an operation that's dismantling their entire regional network. That makes you both a target and a symbol. The threat manifested in subtle ways at first. Suspicious vehicles lingering just beyond the shelter's property. Line. Anonymous calls during the night shift. Small acts of vandalism that seemed designed to test their security response. Each incident was meticulously documented, adding to the growing federal case file. "They're probing our defenses," Mike observed, reviewing security footage with newly installed federal equipment. Testing response times, looking for patterns, trying to find weaknesses. His security background helped him recognize the tactical nature of these approaches. Shadow worked closely with the Federal Protection Team, his previous training now fully evident. He could distinguish between routine shelter traffic and suspicious activity, alerting guards to potential threats while maintaining his protective watch over Elena and the other rescued dogs. "Look at how he operates," Agent Chen said, watching Shadow coordinate with her team. "This isn't just advanced training, this is experience. He's done this kind of protective duty before." The shelter staff adapted to their new reality. Carol began screening all calls through a federal protocol system. Tommy's social media posts about the shelter now went through security review. Dr. Martinez installed additional cameras in the medical wing, understanding that the rescued dogs weren't just patients, they were key evidence in an ongoing federal investigation. Sarah found herself studying the threat letter during quiet moments, seeing beyond its menacing message to what it really revealed. "They're afraid," she realized, sharing her thoughts with Detective Martinez. All their careful planning, their hidden facilities, their sophisticated operation, it was all undone by one undercover dog who saw through their defenses. Shadow's presence remained their greatest security asset. His training allowed him to spot surveillance attempts that even professional security teams might miss. More than once, his alerts had preceded actual security incidents, giving them crucial advance. "Warning! He's not just protecting the shelter," Agent Chen noted after one such incident. "He's protecting the evidence, the rescued dogs, the entire case we're building. He understands exactly how much is at stake here." The threat letter became another piece of evidence in the growing federal case. Its expensive paper and careful printing speaking volumes about the organization behind it. But for those working at Cedar Grove Shelter, it represented something more. Proof that their small-town shelter, guided by one remarkable dog's determination, had struck a serious blow against a criminal enterprise that had operated unchallenged for far too long. The surveillance operation plan spread across the Mobile Command Center's tactical table revealed an operation of unprecedented scope. Color-coded overlays marked observation points, response zones, and potential threat vectors, while shadows documented patrol routes provided crucial intelligence about the criminals' most likely approaches. "They'll come," Detective Martinez said, addressing the Joint Task Force team. "All our intelligence suggests they can't afford to leave this loose end untied. The shelter knows too much, has too much evidence, represents too great a threat to their remaining operations." Agent Chen pointed to key positions on the tactical map. "We've identified 3 likely scenarios based on their previous patterns. They prefer to operate between 2 and 4 a.m., using multiple vehicles, coordinating through burner phones." She gestured to Shadow, who sat alertly beside Sarah. "Our ace in the hole is that they don't know we have someone who's already studied their playbook." The operation plan detailed multiple layers of security, visible patrols designed to be noticed and tracked, hidden observation posts covered by what appeared to be routine shelter maintenance, a sophisticated web of new surveillance equipment disguised within the shelter's existing security system. "Shadow's shown us exactly how they think," Mike explained, having worked closely with federal tactical teams to adapt his security protocols. "They hide their professional operations behind legitimate business fronts, so we'll do the same. Let them see what we want them to see while keeping our real security measures hidden." The shelter maintained its normal routines, but now every staff member played a role in the larger operation. Carol's cheerful phone manner masked a carefully scripted system for identifying suspicious calls. Tommy's social media posts about shelter events were crafted to project vulnerability while concealing their preparedness. Sarah found herself playing perhaps the most crucial role, maintaining her regular schedule while being hyper-aware of every detail that Shadow had taught them to notice. Strange vehicles, unusual patterns, subtle changes in the environment that might signal approaching danger. "You've learned from the best," Agent Chen told her, watching Sarah catalogue potential security concerns exactly as Shadow had done during his undercover work. He wasn't just gathering evidence these past 6 months, he was training you, preparing you for exactly this moment. Shadow moved between his roles with fluid grace. Shelter dog when visitors were present, tactical operator during security, sweeps, protective guardian over Elena and the other rescued dogs. His behavior had become a blueprint for the entire operation, vigilant but not obvious, prepared but not paranoid. The surveillance plan designated the shelter's security office as the operation's nerve center, the same room where Shadow had spent countless hours monitoring criminal activity, now transformed into a command post for bringing them to justice. Federal technicians had upgraded the security system while maintaining its familiar appearance, understanding that sometimes the best place to hide sophisticated equipment was in plain sight. "They'll be watching for changes," Detective Martinez reminded the team during final briefings, "looking for signs that we're prepared for them. Our job is to give them exactly what they expect to see, a small-town shelter trying to protect itself, nothing more." The plan relied heavily on Shadow's intelligence about criminal tactics. His documented observations about their vehicle patterns, approach routes, and surveillance methods had helped craft a response strategy that anticipated their every move. "It's not just about catching them," Agent Chen explained as they finalized positions. "It's about using their own methods against them. Shadow showed us how to hide sophisticated operations behind simple facades. Now we're going to do exactly what he did. Let them see what they expect while preparing for what they plan." The emergency response log would later record the events of that night with clinical precision. 2347, suspicious activity detected at North Perimeter. 2352, power grid disruption attempted. 2355, shadow alerts to multiple approaching vehicles. But in the moment, as the shelter's lights flickered and died, the situation felt anything but clinical. "They're testing the backup generators." Mike's voice crackled over the secure radio network, just like Shadow showed us they would. During his surveillance, Shadow had documented how the criminals would cut power to test a facility's emergency responses before making their main move. Sarah watched the security feeds switch seamlessly to backup power, remembering all the times Shadow had shown unusual interest in their emergency systems. Now she understood. He'd been teaching them what to prepare for, knowing this night would come. The response log tracked multiple threats converging simultaneously, 3 unmarked vans approaching from different directions, signal jammers attempting to disrupt communications, a sophisticated cyber attack probing their network defenses. The criminals weren't just testing the shelter's security, they were launching a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm it. Shadow's behavior shifted the moment the power failed, his undercover persona completely gone. He moved through the darkened shelter with military precision, guiding Sarah and the staff to pre-designated safe positions while maintaining constant awareness of the approaching threat. "They're using our own playbook," Agent Chen observed from the command center, watching thermal imaging feeds track the intruders' movements. Multiple teams, coordinated approach, professional tactical patterns, exactly the kind of operation Shadow documented them using at other facilities. The response log marked each phase of the criminals' advance, probing the perimeter, testing security responses, looking for weaknesses. But thanks to Shadow's intelligence, the shelter team knew what to expect. Each probe was met with carefully planned countermeasures, each test revealing only what they wanted the criminals to see. "Contact at Sector 3, Mike reported, his security background evident in his calm professionalism. "They're moving exactly where Shadow said they would." The old service road that had once served the criminals' hidden facility now channeled their approach directly into prepared response zones. Sarah found herself moving with practiced efficiency through emergency protocols that Shadow had essentially trained them for during his months of undercover work. Every security drill they'd conducted, every system they'd tested, had been preparation for this moment. The response log tracked Shadow's movements as he coordinated with Federal Tactical teams, his previous training now fully unveiled. He wasn't just responding to the threat, he was anticipating it, reading the criminals' patterns, because he'd spent months studying how they operated. Multiple breaches attempted, the log recorded at No. 17, all containment protocols holding. The criminals found their usual tactics failed against defenses designed specifically to counter them. Each move they made had been predicted, each strategy already countered. Shadow's alert posture changed suddenly, drawing everyone's attention to the security feeds. The criminals' probing attacks had masked their true objective, a specialized team approaching from an unexpected angle, using the shelter's old drainage system as cover. That's their real play, Agent Chen realized, watching Shadow's reaction. Everything else is a diversion. They're not trying to break in, they're trying to get to the evidence lockup. The rescued dogs, the documented records, the proof of their operations, all secured in the shelter's reinforced medical wing. The response log's final entries reflected the operation's turning point. 0023. Shadow indicates primary threat identified. 0024. Federal tactical teams moving to intercept. 0025. Shelter lockdown protocols engaged. What had started as a criminal assault had become the moment law enforcement had been waiting for, when those responsible for the underground facility would finally emerge from the shadows. The SWAT team's final operation report described the raid with tactical precision, but even its clinical language couldn't mask the intensity of what unfolded. 0030. K9 Operative Shadow leads tactical teams through previously identified access points. Multiple suspects engaged, primary target secured. They're running a 3-team formation. Agent Chen's voice was steady over the tactical frequency. Shadow's right. It's their standard extraction protocol. The German Shepherd had already positioned himself at the critical intersection point, precisely where the criminals' escape routes would converge. The operation came together like a choreographed dance, with Shadow as its conductor. Every route the criminals tried had been anticipated, every fallback position already covered. 6 months of patient surveillance had mapped their tactics so completely that they were now trapped by their own predictability. Second team intercepted. "In Sector 4, crackled over the radio, they're using the drainage tunnel exactly as Shadow indicated." The SWAT report would later highlight how the dog's intelligence had proven accurate down to the smallest detail, even predicting which direction the suspects would turn when confronted. Sarah, watching from the secured command center, saw Shadow's months of preparation pay off in real time. The criminals' sophisticated tactics, their careful planning, their professional execution, all fell apart against defenses designed specifically to counter them. Every move they made had been documented, studied, and prepared for during Shadow's long undercover mission. "Target team identified," Agent Chen announced, moving to contain. The criminal organization's leadership had come personally, unable to risk their operation being exposed. Just as Shadow had predicted, they couldn't trust anyone else to handle something this crucial to their network's survival. The SWAT report marked the critical moment. 042. K9 Operative Shadow engages primary suspect attempting covert exit through ventilation system. It was the one route they thought was still secret, but Shadow had found it months ago during his careful mapping of the property. The confrontation was brief but intense. The criminal leaders, finding themselves cornered, attempted one final, desperate move. But Shadow had anticipated even this, positioning federal teams exactly where they needed to be. The organization's carefully maintained facade of legitimate business operations crumbled in a matter of minutes. All primary targets in custody, the report concluded. Evidence secured. Operation completed as planned. The raid had been so precisely executed that not a single shot was fired. The criminal organization had been outmaneuvered at every turn by the very tactics they had relied on for years. Sarah watched as Shadow did one final sweep of the property, his movement now openly displaying the professional training that had been hidden for so long. There was no need to maintain his cover anymore. His mission, months in the planning, had been completed with remarkable precision. The SWAT team's after-action report would highlight the unprecedented nature of the operation, how a single undercover K-9 operative had infiltrated a sophisticated criminal organization, documented their methods, and helped design an operation that dismantled their network without a single casualty. Agent Chen found Sarah as the scene was being secured. "You know what's remarkable," she said, watching Shadow return to Elena's side. "He didn't just gather intelligence. He trained your entire shelter to be ready for this moment. Every security drill, every system check, every procedure he showed. Interest in. It was all preparation for tonight." The final entry in the SWAT report noted something unusual. After the operation was complete, Shadow resumed his position at the shelter's security desk, watching the monitors just as he had done for 6 months. But now everyone understood. He wasn't just watching. He was standing guard, protecting not just the shelter, but everything and everyone he had worked so long to save. The evidence inventory filled page after page of federal documentation, each item carefully catalogued and photographed. Item 147. Financial ledgers detailing transactions across 5 states. Item the 148. Digital records of breeding programs. Item the 149. Computer servers containing client databases. The list went on, painting a picture of how extensive the criminal enterprise had truly been. Dawn was breaking over Cedar Grove as the federal evidence teams continued their methodical work. Shadow moved among them with professional courtesy, his demeanor now openly reflecting his training. He paid particular attention to the rescued dogs being processed as evidence, ensuring each one was properly documented while providing a calming presence. "The scope of this is unprecedented," Agent Chen said, reviewing the growing inventory. "Most of our previous raids only caught fragments of their operation. Thanks to Shadow's surveillance, we've got their entire infrastructure documented. Shipping, routes, client lists, supplier networks, everything. Dr. Martinez worked alongside federal veterinarians, processing the medical evidence that would be crucial to the prosecution. Each dog tells a story," she explained, updating medical records that would become court exhibits. The medications they used, the breeding protocols, the genetic tracking, it's all evidence of how sophisticated their operation was. Sarah found herself in a unique position, her shelter experience helping translate between the animal welfare and law enforcement aspects of the case. Shadow didn't just expose their current operation, she noted, reviewing the evidence logs. He gave us the blueprint for identifying similar operations anywhere. The inventory included items that seemed mundane but held crucial significance. Shipping labels that traced interstate transport routes, utility bills that exposed other facility locations, even maintenance records that revealed the network's full scope. Shadow had spent months teaching them what to look for, and now they understood why each detail mattered. "Look at how he documented everything," Agent Chen observed, watching Shadow guide evidence technicians to specific areas he'd surveilled during his undercover work. He wasn't just gathering intelligence, he was building a case that would hold up in court. Every piece of evidence, every connection, every pattern of criminal activity, all documented with judicial review in mind. The morning light revealed the true extent of what they'd uncovered. The shelter's parking lot had become a staging area for seized evidence, each item telling part of a larger story of organized crime hidden behind legitimate business fronts. Shadow's patient surveillance had exposed not just a local operation, but an entire criminal infrastructure. The evidence inventory would become a crucial part of multiple federal cases, its detailed documentation helping dismantle similar operations across the country. But for those who had worked alongside Shadow, it represented something more, proof of one dog's remarkable dedication to justice and his ability to turn a small-town animal shelter into the key that unlocked a criminal empire. The court documents told the story through a series of unprecedented convictions: United States versus Morrison Properties LLC and Associated Enterprises. The federal prosecutor's summary was damning: the most comprehensive animal welfare criminal case ever brought to federal court, resulting in guilty pleas from 37 defendants across 6 states. Shadow's presence in the courthouse drew almost as much attention as the proceedings themselves. Though he wasn't required to appear, he sat with perfect military bearing beside Sarah during key testimonies, his disciplined demeanor a stark contrast to the accused criminals who had unknowingly hosted an undercover operative for 6 months. "The evidence speaks for itself," the lead prosecutor explained to the assembled press. "Thanks to unprecedented long-term surveillance, we have documentation of every aspect of this criminal enterprise. The defendants aren't just facing animal welfare charges. We're looking at money laundering, tax evasion, drug violations, and organized crime statutes." The conviction records grew as defendants began accepting plea deals, each one revealing more connections that led to new investigations. Shadow's meticulous documentation had created a domino effect, with each case leading to the exposure of similar operations across the country. "This case sets a new precedent," Agent Chen noted during a brief recess. "It's the first time animal welfare crimes have been prosecuted using organized crime statutes at the federal level." Shadow didn't just help us shut down one operation, he helped change how these cases will be handled going forward. The final sentencing phase brought closure to Cedar Grove's part in the larger investigation. The Morrison property was seized under federal law, with provisions to transfer it to the shelter for expansion of their rehabilitation programs. Shadow's evidence had not only secured convictions, it had created a legacy of hope for future rescue operations. As the last defendant was sentenced, Sarah noticed Shadow's posture relax slightly. His mission, begun so many months ago with his calculated arrival at their shelter, had reached its successful conclusion. Justice had been served, not just for Elena and the dogs they'd rescued, but for countless others who would be saved by the legal precedents this case had established. The adoption papers sat on Sarah's desk, their official letterhead bearing a unique addendum she'd never seen before: special authorization for transfer of federal K-9 operative to civilian status. Agent Chen had worked through countless bureaucratic layers to make this possible, understanding that Shadow's work had evolved into something more than just an undercover assignment. "He's chosen his new mission," the agent explained, watching Shadow guide a nervous rescue dog through shelter protocols he'd once studied as part of his cover. "Sometimes the most important work isn't about taking down criminals, it's about helping their victims heal." The shelter had transformed in the months following the case. The seized Morrison property, now renovated with funds from the federal settlement, had become a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center for rescued dogs. Elena, fully recovered, worked alongside Shadow, helping new arrivals adjust, their shared experience creating a unique bond with traumatized animals. The adoption papers made it official. Shadow would remain at Cedar Grove not as an undercover operative, but as their head of security and rehabilitation programs. His tactical training, combined with his gentle patience, made him uniquely qualified to help dogs recover from situations he'd helped expose. Sarah signed the papers with a sense of profound rightness. Shadow had come to them playing the role of a shelter dog, but in the process had found his true calling. Sometimes she realized the best undercover work isn't about maintaining a facade, it's about discovering who you really are. The memorial plaque mounted at the entrance of Cedar Grove's new rehabilitation center caught the morning sun. Shadow's Law. In honor of the shelter dog who showed us that the greatest acts of heroism often come disguised as everyday courage. Below the inscription, a perfect reproduction of his paw print had been cast in bronze, a reminder that one individual's dedication could change countless lives. Inside, Shadow moved through his daily rounds with the same attention to detail that had once helped him document criminal activity. But now, his careful observations served a different purpose, noting which rescued dogs needed extra support, which ones were ready for more advanced rehabilitation, which ones might be ready to trust again. Sarah often found him in the security office, still watching the monitors with professional focus, but now teaching other shelter dogs how to help guard their safe haven. Elena worked alongside him. Their partnership evolved from survivors to protectors, showing other rescued dogs that healing was possible. The plaque had become a symbol of hope in the animal welfare community, but for those who knew the full story, it represented something more. Proof that sometimes the most powerful changes start with one individual willing to maintain a long, patient vigil in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to bring truth into light.